This video is sponsored by Taskade, a real-time organization and collaboration platform. Make sure to check the description for a discount on your subscription. Hey everyone, my name is Vishwas and welcome to the HTML crash course for complete beginners. If you're aiming to become a web developer, you're at the right place as HTML is the first step you need to take in that direction. Typically, building websites involves three technologies. HTML, which is responsible for the structure of your website, like text or images you see. CSS, which is responsible for the presentation of your website, like colors, spacing, alignment, etc. And finally, JavaScript, which is responsible for handling interactivity, like button clicks, for example. HTML is a prerequisite to CSS and JavaScript for the web, which is why learning HTML is your first step. Before we begin, let me go over a few points to give you an idea of what this video is and what it is not. First, I would like to mention this course is for complete beginners. I'm going to assume you have no prior knowledge of HTML and teach the course. If you are someone who is already familiar with HTML, this is your cue to probably hop into another video where your time can be better utilized. Second, I'm going to cover most of the concepts in HTML that you as a beginner should know. It is a crash course and not an exhaustive course on every single HTML topic. Having said that, this course is probably all you need in the first year or two of your web development journey. Third, this course is going to focus only on HTML. Although learning CSS goes hand in hand with HTML, we are going to take a look at CSS in the next video. Fourth, this video, unlike other videos in my channel, is a crash course and is longer in length. This doesn't mean you have to sit through the entire video at once. Take it easy, pause when necessary, and most importantly, make sure you code along with me, as that is the best way to learn. By the end of this video, you will have a solid understanding of HTML. Alright, with these points in mind, let's get started. To work with HTML, we need two things: a browser and a code editor. For browser, you can use Chrome, Firefox, or even Edge. I am going to be using Chrome. To write the HTML code, we need an editor. I would recommend Visual Studio Code. It is probably the best editor out there to get started with HTML. Head over to code.visualstudio.com and download the same for your operating system. Once you install VS Code, open the editor. Here, we're going to install one extension which is helpful for formatting the code we write. So in the sidebar, open Extensions and install the Prettier extension, the one which has been installed over 17 million times. Finally, open the editor inside a folder of your choice. I have created a folder called HTML Crash Course, and I've opened VS Code inside that folder. You can do the same by going to File and clicking on Open Folder. This pretty much is all the setup we have to do. Now we are ready to learn HTML. First, let us understand what is HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language and is the language for creating web pages. Now, the expansion itself isn't very important as everyone refers to it as just HTML. But what is important is to keep in mind that it is a markup language and not a programming language. So we simply mark certain things in the code we write, which tells the browser how to structure the web page. It does not contain any logic like conditionals or branching. HTML consists of a series of elements, and each element tells the browser how to display the content. All we have to do is learn about these individual elements, and we would have effectively learned HTML. Alright, now that we know what HTML is, let's dive into VS Code and write some HTML. First, we need to create a file which will contain all our HTML code. Such a file is called an HTML file and has the extension .html. So click on the new file icon and create a file called index.html. Now the file name can be hello.html or test.html or any name of your liking, but index.html is sort of the convention, and I would recommend you follow the same. Within the file, we can type welcome to HTML and save the file using Ctrl S or Command S on your keyboard. We can now go back to the HTML crash course folder, which contains index.html, and simply double-click on the file. This will open the file in your default browser, and you should be able to see the text "Welcome to HTML." As you can see, you're now able to get some content onto the web browser. But HTML isn't just writing text. It is about marking that text to appear in a different way. And we do that by writing an HTML element. An HTML element is the building block of an HTML document. Usually, it has what is called an opening tag, a closing tag, and the content in between. A closing tag will contain the / before the tag name, whereas the opening tag does not. It is also possible to contain one element as content of another element. So nesting of HTML elements is possible and is necessary when building any practical web page. Our goal now is to go through the various HTML elements and understand how they affect the content. But first, we need to understand the structure of an HTML document. We begin by informing the browser this document is an HTML document. So angle brackets, exclamation, doc type, HTML. This will be the very first line of every HTML document you write. Next, we're going to write our first HTML element, which is the HTML element. So angle brackets again, HTML, and when I close the angle brackets, VS Code automatically populates the closing tag. So we have an opening tag and a closing tag. In between the two tags, we specify the content. Now this HTML element wraps all the content and is known as the root element. Within the HTML element, we add two more elements. The first one is the head element, and the second is the body element. So head and body. The head element is where you want to add content you want included in the HTML page, but shouldn't be presented to the user. Now that's a bit confusing, so we will talk more about the head tag later on in the video, but for now, let's include one HTML element to understand how it works. And that element is the title element, which sets the title of the HTML page and appears in the browser tab. So within the head tag, add a title tag, and the content is going to be HTML crash course. Finally, Within the body tag, we can specify the text from before. Welcome to HTML. You can now press Ctrl-Shift-P and click on Format Document. Now, if it prompts you, select Prettier as the code formatter. You can also press Alt-Shift-F as the keyboard shortcut to format the document. And this pretty much completes our very first HTML document. Let's save the file, head to the browser, and refresh. You can see the text "Welcome to HTML" still being displayed. However, if you look at the browser tab, you can see HTML Crash Course, which is the title of this web page. It is also what is used to describe the page when you bookmark it. And of course, that corresponds to the content in the title tag. So this is the basic HTML document structure that you'll need to keep in mind. A document type, the enclosing HTML tag, the head tag for information that should not be presented to the user, and the body tag for the content that should be presented to the user. With this structure in mind, let us now focus on the different elements that we can use to structure the content within the body tag. Let's begin with formatting text in HTML. Now, you might have browsed hundreds of websites and you would have seen the text formatted in various ways. But to set some context, here is an image of a newspaper from the Mozilla Docs, which I feel does a good job of giving you an idea of text formatting. In the main content, we have a very large headline, and below that, we have relatively smaller headlines. We then have another set of headings, bottom right, and the rest of the content is filled with paragraphs of text. Now, this sort of a structured text is not restricted to just newspapers. It applies to web pages as well. Users looking at a web page tend to scan quickly to find relevant content, often just reading the headings before deciding whether to read the corresponding paragraph of text or not. So HTML gives us heading and paragraph elements for some basic structuring of the text. Let's go over heading elements first. HTML headings are titles or subtitles that you want to display on a web page. There are 6 heading elements in total. The first one is the H1 element. So we specify the opening H1 tag, the closing H1 tag, and the content in between. Let's type heading 1. If we now head back to the browser and refresh, you can see we have the text in larger font size and is also bold. The H1 tag corresponds to the title of your web page and is a good practice to have only one H1 tag per page. Which brings us to the H2 tag. Back in the editor, I'm going to make a copy of this tag, Shift Alt down arrow being the shortcut, and change H1 to H2 and the content to heading 2. Save and take a look at the browser. You can see we have the H2 text. And this is usually used for subheadings. If your web page needs more hierarchy in the content, you can rely on the remaining heading tags. I'm going to press Alt Shift or Option Shift and down arrow to make copies of the H2 tag. Once, twice, 3 times, and 4 times. Now change the tags to H3 all the way till H6. change the content as well. If you now save the file and take a look at the browser, refresh, you can see the heading text being formatted in different ways. Now this seems a bit large because I have zoomed in. So let me reset. And you can see the actual size of H1 to H6 tags. They all are formatted differently. Each heading starts in a new line and also has some spacing at the bottom to separate from the content below. So we have marked the content using tags to let the browser know how to display the content. This is pretty much what we do with HTML. Hopefully, you're starting to get the hang of it. Another HTML element that is used for displaying text is the paragraph element. Add an opening tag, which is P, and the closing tag. For the content, I'm going to add this is a paragraph. Take a look at the browser, and you see the paragraph text being displayed. A paragraph text always starts on a new line, and unlike headings, it is usually a block of text. So text you see in a blog post, product descriptions on your e-commerce sites, etc. To add more content to display in a paragraph, add a new P tag, and for the content, type lorem, L-O-R-E-M, and press tab. Format it, and you can see when we tab, it fills in a paragraph of text without you having to type it all out. Let's make a copy of this, save the file, refresh, and you can see that each paragraph starts on a new line and adds a little spacing to the content below. And what you do have to learn here is that you cannot change the display by adding extra spaces or extra lines in your HTML code. The browser will automatically remove any extra spaces and lines when the page is being displayed. So even if you split this paragraph into separate lines, the output will remain the same. If you intentionally want to add line breaks, HTML provides a line break element which you can use. So after a line, we can add the break tag. Copy and paste it. Now the break tag is sort of a special tag in the sense that you're allowed to skip the closing tag as there is no content. So just angle brackets, and even this / is optional. The prettier formatter we are using does add the /. So when you format the document, you're going to see this self-closing break tag. If you save the file, refresh, you can see that our last paragraph is now split across 3 lines. First line, then HTML encounters a break tag. So second line, a break tag again, and then the third line. Now while we're on this topic of separation of content and self-closing tags, another noteworthy element is the horizontal rule. The tag is HR, which is again self-closing. I've added an HR tag in between the paragraph elements. If I refresh the browser, you can see a horizontal rule is drawn across the page and separates the 2 paragraphs. Generally, spacing is sufficient to separate 2 paragraphs, but it is worth knowing about the horizontal rule as well. Next, let's take a look at inline formatting of text. HTML provides a few elements to format text in a certain way. The first one is the strong tag, which is used to add importance to the text. In our paragraph, we can wrap any text with the strong tag. So strong opening and strong closing. Save the file, refresh, and you can see such content being displayed in bold to the user. You can mark any text that the user should not miss when reading the content. Similarly, the next tag is the emphasis tag and is used to stress on certain words. So opening tag is EM, and let's wrap the next two words. In web pages, emphasized text is italicized, as you can see here with the next two words. Now you could substitute strong with B tag for bold and emphasis tag with I tags for italics, refresh, and the display remains the same. However, these tags do not carry any semantic meaning and is not good for a search engine and from a screen reader point of view, which reads out the text for people with visual impairment. So make sure you stick to strong and emphasis tags. The next tag is a small tag, which is used to define smaller text. So small opening and closing. If you have fine print in your web page, you can use small tag and it will appear small, as you can see. The next tag is the mark tag, which is used to highlight text. So opening mark tag, closing, and this will highlight text similar to highlighting text in a book. If you want to indicate strike through, the tag to use is the delete tag. So wrap with DEL, refresh, and you can see the strike through. This tag can be used to showcase intentional correction, for example. If you need to underline text, you can use the insert tag. So INS, opening tag, closing tag, refresh, and we have underlined text. Last but not the least, you can use the sub tag for subscripts and sub tag for superscripts. Refresh, and you can see the subscript and the superscript. As you can see, HTML provides good support for formatting text the way you want to. Now, one thing you might have noticed is that the heading and paragraph tags start the content on a new line, whereas the formatting tags don't start on a new line. Which brings us to the two default display values of HTML elements. In HTML, elements can either be block level or inline. A block level element always starts on a new line and takes up the full width available. An inline element, on the other hand, does not start on a new line and only takes up as much width as necessary. Although we have seen examples of both, there are two more elements that you need to be aware of. First is the division element or the div tag. This element is a block level element. So if you have two div tags, block 1 and block 2, they start on a new line and take up the full width. Of course, the text is pretty small right now, so you don't see it spanning the entire width of the browser. Next, we have the span element or the span tag, which is an inline element. So inline 1 and inline 2. If we refresh, you can see inline 2 does not start on a new line, and both take up only the necessary width. In this case, the width of the text. Now when writing HTML alone, the div and span tags are of less significance. They are, however, very useful when we have to add styles to a group of elements or only a portion of the element. We will revisit these tags in the CSS crash course. For now, just remember about the div tag, which is a block level element, and the span tag, which is an inline element. There are two tags which you see a lot in web development. Alright, now let's move on to the next set of elements. And these are elements which are concerned with rendering a list in the browser. Lists, as you might have guessed, are very common in day-to-day life. A list of shopping items, a list of events, a list of things to do on your next vacation, etc. Lists are everywhere, and you might have to display them in your web page as well. HTML provides 3 different types of lists. Let's go over them one at a time. The first type is the unordered list, which is used to mark up lists of items where the order doesn't matter. For example, a shopping list. You may have to buy bread, milk, and eggs, but the order doesn't have any significance. To define unordered lists, we make use of 2 HTML tags. First, we write a UL tag for unordered list, and then as content for this UL tag, we specify individual items using the list item tag, which is LI. So LI, opening and closing tags, the content will be bread. Similarly, the second item is milk, and the third item is eggs. If we now save the file and refresh, you should see the list of items being displayed. Let me zoom in a little bit. We have bread, milk, and eggs. The list items will be marked with bullets by default. Similar to unordered lists, HTML also provides ordered lists. As the name indicates, with ordered lists, order does matter. For example, if you're giving a set of directions to your friend, reach point A, turn right and reach point B, turn left and arrive at point C. The order matters in that case. For ordered lists, we simply have to replace UL with OL. So make a copy, paste it, and change UL to OL for ordered list. Let me also change the content of the items. Reach point A, turn left and reach point B, turn left and arrive at point C. Save the file, and you should now be able to see the ordered list. The list items will be marked with numbers by default. The final list type is description lists. It is a list of terms with a description of each term. The list has 3 tags that we need to use. We wrap with a definition list tag, so DL. And within the list, we add terms and their definitions using DT and DD tags. For example, DT, ice cream, which is the term, and DD, a soft, sweet, frozen food, which is the definition. Similarly, DT, the term is going to be tea, and DD, the definition is going to be a hot drink. If we save the file, refresh, and you can see the definition list being rendered in the browser. So these are the 3 ways to display lists in HTML. Alright, the next thing we should learn about is HTML attributes. HTML attributes provide additional information about HTML elements. All HTML elements can have attributes. However, we are going to take a look at 2 elements where the attributes sort of define the element itself. The first one is the image HTML element, which is used to embed an image in the web page. The image tag also doesn't need a closing tag. So img self-closing. Now this image tag needs to know which image to display. For that, I'm going to add an image into the same folder as our HTML file. The file name is logo.jpg and is the logo of Codevolution. If I open the Explorer in Visual Studio Code, you can see logo.jpg. Now to connect the logo file with the image element, we need to add the source attribute, src for short. To this, we assign the path to the file. And this is going to be logo.jpg as it is in the same folder as index.html. If we now save and refresh the browser, we should see a very large image. And this is because the image dimensions are huge. So what we can do is specify 2 more attributes that restrict the dimensions. One is width, which we can set to 200, and the other is height, which we can set to 200 again. The default unit for these attributes is pixels. Refresh the browser again, and we see a much smaller image. One more important attribute we should specify on the image tag is the alt attribute. I'm going to set its value to the text, Codevolution logo. This attribute is picked up by screen readers and is used to describe the image to visually impaired people. So this is pretty much how you embed an image in your web page, using the image tag and the mandatory source attribute. Alright, the second element we should learn about when learning HTML attributes is the anchor tag denoted by A. This tag is used to create hyperlinks to other pages. It is also probably the element you're already familiar with, having navigated thousands of websites. The syntax is as follows. In between the tags, we specify the text to display in the browser. Let's say Google. Now on the opening tag, we specify an attribute called href. To this attribute, we specify the address where we need to navigate to. In our case, https://google.com. If we now head back to the browser, refresh, you can see we have a link that says Google. The styling is a little different to the other text elements we have seen so far. The cursor also changes to a pointer when we hover over the text. Click on the link and we are directed to Google homepage. This is the basic working of an anchor tag. Of course, the linking doesn't have to be to other pages on the internet. We could link between 2 pages in our own folder. So back in VS Code, let me create a new file, contact.html. Type exclamation and tab. This will populate a sample HTML document. In the body tag, add another anchor tag. The text is going to be home, and href is going to be index.html. Similarly, in index.html, we're going to add another anchor tag where the text is contact, and href is going to be contact.html. If we head back to the browser, refresh, we can click on contact. We go to contact.html, which is the contacts page, click on home, and we are back at the home page. So we can navigate back and forth within our own website. We have two pages which are linked together. Now, one attribute that is commonly used with anchor element is the target attribute. You can set target is equal to _blank. And what this does is open the link in a new tab instead of the same tab. Refresh, click on Google, and it opens in a new tab. So target is equal to blank is pretty useful when you're directing users away from your web page. Both image and anchor elements are essential when building websites, so make sure you're clear on these topics. Alright, the next topic is HTML tables. When building web pages, you're going to come across the need to display rows of data. A table of user information, a table of product data, a table of shipping charges by location, etc. Arranging data in rows and columns is common. To help with that, HTML provides several elements that need to be nested at different levels. First, we specify the table tag. So opening table and closing table tag. Nested within table tags, we specify t_head for the table header and t_body for the table body. Within the t_head tag, we specify one row using the tr tag, short for table row. A row can have one or more columns, and if it is the heading for the column, we specify the th tag, short for table heading. Let's specify the content as heading 1. Similarly, let's add two more columns. So duplicate the th tag twice and change the content to heading 2 and heading 3. That should be good for our column headings. Now for the body. Similar to the code above, we begin by adding a row using the tr tag. Within the row, we specify data that has to go in each column using td tags. Since we have 3 columns, we specify 3 td tags. The content can be data 1, data 2, and data 3. This now adds one row into our table. We can copy and paste this tr tag 2 more times. Change the text to 4, 5, 6, and data 7, 8, 9. What we have done is basically add 3 rows to the table data. If we now refresh and zoom in a bit, you should see the arrangement of data in rows and columns. The first row consists of heading, where the text is in bold. Then we have 3 rows of data. Of course, there is no border and the spacing isn't great, but styling is part of CSS, which you will learn in the next crash course. For now, make sure you're aware of the different tags and the levels of nesting when it comes to displaying a table in the browser. Table tag, a thead and tbody tag. Within thead, add a row using tr and th for the columns. Within the body, tr for a row again, but td for the columns. Very important to keep in mind the different levels of nesting. So that is about the table tag. The next topic we have to learn about is HTML forms. So far, we have been displaying data to the user. When building web pages, you will come across situations where you need to collect data from the user. For example, user details in a registration form or personal details when applying for a bank account. Forms allow users to enter data, which is generally sent to a web server for processing and storage. In this video, we are only going to focus on the HTML part of a web form and not processing the data, as you need a lot more than just HTML for that. Let's take a look at the different HTML elements that are typically used when creating forms. Now, every form begins with a form tag. So opening and closing tags. Next, let's add a form input to collect a user's name. For that, we make use of two elements. First, a label element to display the input label. Let's call this field username. Next, an input element to accept some text. Input is the tag, and this is a self-closing tag. We're going to specify type is equal to text as an attribute. And I'm going to add a few break tags for some spacing. So after the label, a break tag, and another pair of break tags after the input element. Ideally, spacing should be taken care with CSS, but break tags will serve the purpose for now. If we take a look at the browser, refresh, you can see the username label and the input element. Now, what is a good practice with form controls, as we call them, is tying the label with the input. For that, we add an ID attribute to the input element and use its value on the for attribute for the label. So ID on input is going to be equal to username, and label for attribute is equal to the ID of the input, which is again username. So we are telling this label is for this input. What this does is, when we click on the label, it focuses the input element. And this is considered a good practice in HTML. So this is the input element. Let's look at a few more form elements. Next, we have a text area to collect a larger text from the user. First, we're going to add a label, which is going to be about you. And then for text area, we use the text area tag. I'm going to set ID is equal to about and add on the label for attribute is equal to about. I'm also going to add a few break tags for spacing. If we now take a look at the browser, refresh, you can see that we have a text area. And here we can type multiple lines of text. The next form control is the drop-down control. Again, a label. Let's call it country. And the tag this time is select. Within the select tag, we need to specify the different options. We're going to specify 3 countries as options. Each option is represented with an option tag. And for each option, we specify the text to be displayed and the value of that option. For example, Text is India. Value is also going to be India. So India with uppercase is displayed to the user, and lowercase India is the value sent to the server. Let's add two more options. So I'm going to make a copy. This is going to be Singapore. The value is going to be the same with lowercase. And finally, Vietnam. I'm also going to add on the select tag, ID is equal to country. And for the label, for is equal to country. A bit of spacing. And if you now take a look at the browser, you can see the drop-down with three options. India, Singapore, and I guess Vietnam is cut out of the display. All right, the next form control is radio button group, which allows the user to select one value from many options. Let's say the job type is part-time or full-time. In that case, we're going to add a label that says job type. And below the label, we're going to add first an input element. This is a self-closing tag. By default, the input element type is text, which is not what we want right now. For radio buttons, we specify type is equal to radio. But we also need to specify a few more attributes. I'm going to add name is equal to job type, the actual value which will be sent to the server. So this is going to be part-time. And then I'm also going to set an ID, part-time. Now this radio button needs a label. So we're going to add the label after the input. This is going to be part-time. And the for attribute is also going to be part-time. So this label is for this input element. I'm going to add a break tag after the main job type label and also after the first radio button. I'm going to make a copy of the input element along with the label and paste it. Our second option, type, is going to be radio again, and the name needs to remain the same. Job type and job type. Both the radio buttons belong to the same group. The value though is going to be full-time, and so is the ID. The label for attribute is going to be full-time, and the text is going to be full-time. I'm also going to add another pair of break tags for some spacing. If we now head to the browser, you can see we can now select the job type as part-time or full-time. Now it's also possible that you want the user selecting both the options. In that case, we make use of checkboxes instead of radio buttons. All we have to do is change the type attribute from radio to checkbox. So let me make a copy of this job type and change radio to checkbox. And I'll also change the ID as it should be unique within a page. Part-time checkbox, full-time checkbox. Job type is job type checkbox, job type checkbox for the name attribute. If we now go back to the browser, refresh, we have checkboxes. We can select part-time as well as full-time. So these are some of the most common ways to accept input from a user. A single line input, multi-line input, a drop-down, radio buttons, and checkboxes. Now what you might want at the end of this form is a button to send all the data to your server. For that, within the form tag, add a button element, so button opening and closing tags, and the text is going to be submit. At the moment, this will not send the data to any server. That part is out of scope for HTML, so for now, make sure you understand about the various form controls and this submit button. The next topic we're going to learn about is semantic HTML. And this is something that is given more care as you become familiar with HTML. When grouping elements or content in web page, it is possible to use div and span tags. If you were to open a pretty old website, you will see hundreds of div and span tags. However, these tags tell nothing about their content. Semantic HTML aims to fix this problem. A semantic element clearly describes the meaning in a human and machine-readable way. In HTML5, there are roughly 100 semantic elements. For this crash course, I want to highlight just a few frequently used elements. Here is a typical layout for a web page. For the header, you would use the header tag. For the navigation bar, where you typically see links to home, about, services, etc., you use the nav tag. You then have the section tag, which defines a section of the page. For example, an intro, some contact info, etc. You also have the article tag, which can be used for blog posts, product cards, user comments, newspaper articles, etc. The aside tag is used to define some content aside from the main content. For example, a sidebar where you can highlight recent or featured blog posts. Finally, you have the footer for links in your web page like privacy policy, copyright info, sitemap, etc. With semantic HTML, the code suggests to the developer the type of data that will be populated. And not just that, semantic HTML helps search engines to influence the page search rankings, and screen readers can use them as a signpost to help visually impaired users navigate a page. Semantic HTML is quite important from an interview point of view as well. So once you're comfortable with basic HTML elements, make sure you get a good grasp on semantic HTML elements. That pretty much wraps up everything we had to learn from a body tag point of view. For our final bit, let's dive deeper into the head HTML element we discussed very early in this video. The head of an HTML document is the part that is not displayed in the web browser when the page is loaded. It does, however, contain the title and metadata about the HTML document. The tag that is used to describe metadata is the meta tag. There are quite a few types of meta elements that you can add. I'm going to go over some of the more important ones. The first meta tag is to specify the document's character encoding. So meta char set is equal to UTF-8. UTF-8 is a universal character set that includes pretty much any character from any human language. This means that your web page will be able to handle displaying any language, and therefore a good idea to set this on every web page you create. The next meta element we can use to set the author of the page. So meta name is equal to author, content is equal to codevolution. Another important meta tag you can include for SEO purpose is the page description. So meta name is equal to description, And content is going to be equal to this web page aims to provide beginners information about HTML fundamentals. Lastly, a meta tag that you might often see is setting the viewport. So meta name is equal to viewport. Content is going to be equal to width is equal to device width. Initial scale is equal to 1.0. This ensures your web page width adapts to the device viewport and sets the initial scale. If you know about these meta tags, you're all set with the head section of an HTML document. Now, apart from this, you have script and style tags, which you can include in the head section. Style tag more so than the script tag. But that is to do with CSS and JavaScript, so we will tackle them in separate videos. With that, we come to the end of this crash course on HTML. If you're new to web development, I hope the video has given you an idea of how web pages are created with HTML. If you've enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content on web development. I'll see you in the next video, which is a crash course on CSS.